Now, the new government has taken charge of the country amid challenges of a sharp slowdown in growth and high unemployment. And Shireen Bhan of CNBC TV18 caught up with the top team at CII to talk to them about what they are expecting from Modi 2.0.
I think the first one would be domestic consumption. How do we increase domestic consumption? Exports are of course there, but the world economy is also having some constraints. So domestic consumption is the first thing. How do we increase domestic consumption?
So what's the prescription?
So one, obviously some of the issues are liquidity due to the past NBFC crisis. Perhaps tax rate, how to have more money in the hands of consumers, how to increase the confidence level in the economy, get some kind of a I think someone else, Uday will speak on animal feel into the economy. This is the first major point I think we need to do. We need to look across all tax rate. One of the ideas we have suggested is on reduction of corporate taxes and reduction of removing all the exemptions.
Yeah.
That's one.
18% is the demand that CII has put forward to the government.
With
You're
zero
really hoping that that's going to happen. I mean, 25% hasn't happened.
I know.
People like you, so do you really believe that
this is a new government with a lot of new ideas. They want to do something. We really need to kickstart the economy. We need to get into a 10% growth rate if we have to satisfy the demands of our rural and our young people.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think something more aggressive has to be done.
Something more aggressive has to be done. That's the view there from Bikram Kirloskar, President of CII. Uday Kotak, let me start by asking you, sir, you know, we've been talking about unleashing of the animal spirits for a very long time now. What would be the top priorities on your prescription list in order for us to be able to do that? I mean, 18% corporate tax rate, I'm not sure whether that is something that the government may consider doing at this point in time, given the fiscal constraints as fact, and also the revenue buoyancy hasn't been as per expectation. So what would you realistically expect and like to see?
If you look at the Indian economy, it's on two legs, consumption and investment. Consumption has slowed down recently, but for the first few years of this previous government was in good shape. Investment is where the challenge is. And within investment, the government has invested pretty actively over the last 5 years. It is private investment. And in order to get private investment back, we need entrepreneurs to feel like putting money to work.
Okay. What will get them to feel like putting money to work?
I think...
I mean, is there demand for them to be able to set up additional capacity, fresh capacity?
I think it's chicken or egg. This is probably a very good time to really put up capacity with a 5-year view.
Okay.
I would go for smart capacity addition. I would like to see, obviously interest rates need to correct downwards. I would like to see liquidity continue to get better. And we need to also make things easier. If you look at the entire situation, there's a lot of preemption of high rates of interest paid on savings. For example, small savings rates by the government. They're much higher than the deposit rates of banks. Therefore, if banks have to get deposits, there has to be some parity in how the interest rate cycle works. Similarly, tax exemptions on debt instruments should be corrected. And finally, equity investors must feel that it is better to invest in equities. Today, there are 4 taxes on equities. Number 1 is corporate tax. Number 2 is dividend distribution tax. Number 3 is tax on dividends, about 10 lakhs. And number 4 is capital gains tax, which has come back. So we need to encourage equity investment to get the animal spirits back.
Of the 4 that you mentioned, and I'll pick up each of these points, but on the equity part, of the 4 taxes that you mentioned, capital gains was brought back. Do you believe that there is a case today and for a rollback, and do you expect that?
I think if we want animal spirits back, people should be ready to invest equity into new projects. There is a challenge for equity savings in this country as the traditional promoter class has got into hibernation. We need to get equity and risk capital and risk appetite back. And whatever we need to do, it must, number 1, make equity more attractive compared to debt. And number 2, entrepreneurs must feel like putting money to work.
Okay, since we've got the MPC coming up, and the CNBC TV18 Citizens Monetary Policy is very clear, unanimous in its view that 25 basis point cut is what the MPC should move with. Let me get all four of you to comment on that, and I'll start by asking you, Mr. Kotak, expectation of a 25 basis point cut from this policy, but what's also the rate outlook for the year, and do you expect a change in stance as well?
See, number one, I think 25 basis rate cut is reasonably baked in by markets, but it has to be combined with transmission. And for banks to transmit, they need the cost of deposits to come down. For the cost of deposits to come down, alternative instruments should be at reasonable parity.
Okay.
And this is where the issue is. Small savings even now pay over 8%. And a 20% of delta mobilization of fiscal deficit is coming from small savings at much higher rates than government securities rates.
Right.
So bring parity back and make sure that transmission of rates happens through better liquidity and lowering of deposit rates.
Do you believe that there is a need now, and we've discussed this in the past, but given the fact that Mr. Kirloskar also talked about liquidity, that a CRR cut is warranted, and do you see that as being something on the cards?
I would like to see it, but I would be surprised if it was done now.
TV Narendran, what's the expectation as far as the MPC is concerned on rate cuts, and then I'll address the issue about fresh capacity.
Sure. I think I agree with Uday. I think 25 is kind of factored in already, and I think that's the least one should expect. Certainly, to me, liquidity is a very, very big issue. Money needs to flow into the system. I think over the last few months, while various actions have been taken, it's not been effective enough, and a lot of money stop flowing just before the elections. So I think the rural economy is also...
So this is largely the NBFC spillover that continues to impact sentiment.
And the government spending as well. I think a lot of the construction activity which had started off slowed down a bit because money was not being paid, and there are many in the construction industry who have not been paid, and that has a trickle-down effect on many industries, whether it's the equipment manufacturers, whether it is the money flowing into the rural markets. So we're seeing that in rural markets where till September things were looking quite decent, things have slowed down, which is reflected in, let's say, motorcycle sales and things like that, right?
It's a challenging mix that the new finance minister is going to have to deal with, both local as well as global. What, to your mind, will have to be the key areas outside of liquidity, cost of doing business, ease of doing business, that they must focus on?
You know, one of the things is a big chance being the budget coming up within the first 100 days of the government, so to say. One of the things that they should do is to really go out of the box. And like one of the things that CII has suggested is to really look at certain sectors. Look at, say, for instance, a huge potential. You talked about employment. Let's look at a sector which can increase employment, which can increase your foreign exchange earnings, which can really trigger economy strongly. Say tourism. Bring in a tourism czar who will be able to change the complete spectrum of tourism. Similarly, in certain other sectors of the economy, on construction and real estate, if you have a similar intervention of that kind. So empowered sort of intervention, and with one czar who was allowed to set a target, get the outcomes done, that would create a huge impact, and that would really have a huge trickle-down effect in various other sectors of the economy.
Okay, so 25 basis points rate cut is pretty much priced into the market. The market wants more in terms of either further rate cuts or some liquidity measures to boost sentiment. That's at least the feedback we're getting from CII. We'll take a short break and we'll come back with lots more.